Hello, greetings from SUGHYD. Today's event focuses on accelerators versus a custom build, lessons from the front lines of XM Cloud, presented by Nathan and hosted by Vishal and Yaman. Over to you, Nathan.
Thanks, Yamini. Can you guys see my screen? Is it all okay?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So I've modified it a little bit this time. We'll be talking about the different types of accelerators as well. If time permits, I'll go a little bit deeper in, but ideally what we'll be doing is we'll be talking through a custom build case study and an accelerator case study. So before we get into that, I thought I should first, share a little bit about why I actually picked this topic. We work in the partner world, so in the agency land, and I come from sales and marketing. The number of times we get into conversations, and you guys would be, hearing this quite a bit from your colleagues about, what can we do about price? Can we reduce the price of a project? How long does the project take to build? What can we do to shorten the time frame of a project, the timeline? Now, if we get a brick every single time we would ask those questions, I think we would be able to build a house with it. That's why we thought it's important to actually share a little bit about why accelerators have come about. Now, before we get into the contents, well, let me just very quickly introduce myself. So I'm Nathan Saldanha. I look after the global sales from a commercial and sales front for Codehouse, but mainly for North America and APJ, Australia and New Zealand, to be more specific. In a different life, I used to be a mechanical engineer. So I've worked with, you guys have heard of Suzlon. I worked as a mechanical engineer at Suzlon, building wind turbines, and then moved into industrial automation. So anything to do with automating factories. That was what I used to be doing until 2018 and when I made the move to Codehouse. And at Codehouse, it's mainly sales and commercial. So with that, let's actually get into the contents. So the contents for today, I'll introduce the case study number one, which is CIMIC, which we actually built without an accelerator. We'll then go into case study two, which was with an accelerator. I'll then go into a brief history about why accelerators came out within the Sitecore ecosystem. All of y'all are working within the Sitecore ecosystem, but you'll need to understand why Sitecore pushes this quite heavily. What is the motivation for it? We'll then talk about the different types of accelerators within the Sitecore ecosystem, not XM Cloud, but Sitecore. So all products, and then we'll go about a simple question about, can we always use one? Can we not use one? When should we always consider accelerators? All right, so CIMIC. Now, for those of you that don't know of CIMIC, CIMIC is one of Australia's largest companies. They have a portfolio in asset infrastructure, construction, mining. They own companies that build, all of these. They partnered with us somewhere in 2018, 19, and it was mainly for Sitecore XP and managed services around the cloud. In 2022, they decided that they need to rebuild their website. Now, why did they rebuild? We'll talk about it in the next slide. And we built that project. It went live in December 2023. And this was Australia's first project to go live on XM Cloud. It was Asia Pacific's second project to go live on XM Cloud and such. So we got a lot of learnings. Sitecore got a lot of learnings from this particular project. The highlights were that it went live on budget and 6 months ahead of schedule. How did that happen? We'll talk about it very soon. And the other thing we'll also spend time talking about is the business case, which is the next slide. One thing to remember, we won an award for this last year, which was our 16th or 15th Sitecore Experience Award. So the first one for Australia, though. Usually all of the awards are won from the London team. All right, so business case. We have a very strong NDA with CIMIC, so I won't be able to go, too deep line by line into each one, but I'll try to elaborate as much as I can over the next 15 minutes on this particular topic. So October 22, we have to decide whether we go down the route of upgrade or rebuild. Now, all of y'all in the Sitecore ecosystem would know that If we have to upgrade, it depends on whether it is a mini upgrade or a major upgrade. A mini upgrade, generally speaking, from an Australian standpoint, costs anywhere between what, 30 to 70, $80,000, whereas a major upgrade would cost on the higher five figures to the lower six figures in numbers. That is dead money, because the only reason you always upgrade your site is to be on the latest version. Not many upgrade for the marketing features. Majority of them upgrade because they are come to end of life. There's extended support and sustaining support after your normal product life cycle support anyway. In Cimic's case, we have to decide whether it is worth going down the life sustaining support and upgrading, or just rebuild. That was a conversation which we had with them, and we tend to lean towards the rebuild side because you get a lot of money that was saved that can be used towards a vanilla project. The second reason for them to rebuild was content authoring improvements. The Cimic team, I'm trying to put it in a way whereby, I don't breach NDAs, but the Cimic team do not like the content authoring side of Sitecore XP. They just don't like it. So all of y'all are very familiar with content editor. The content editor was made for technical people, and the experience editor was made for marketing people. Now, if a project has been built well, you will be able to use both the editors. If a project has not been built well, you tend to only use the content editor. In Cimic's case, they were only using the content editor. So assume communication managers, content authors, marketing managers not liking how the experience is from a back end, especially when they're trying to publish content and create pages. So that was one of the things we needed to improve as part of this. We needed to make sure that they get a WYSIWYG inline text editing, brilliant UI, which XM Cloud and Pages was able to give. So that was a tick from a business case point of view. The third one, and this is again very important when you build your business case, is infrastructure considerations. In the XP world, you have everything to do with the application, and then you have the infrastructure as a side note, a separate thing. You either do it internally through your in-house infrastructure teams, or you partner with someone to do it for you. In this case, we have to actually take into account the whole 360. So we're talking about application, which is Sitecore. We're talking about code house spend. We're talking about infrastructure, the management of that infrastructure. If you go to XM Cloud, you no longer have infrastructure at that level. You're talking about the head, which is either going to be Vercel, Netlify, Azure, whatever way you want to do it. But you will save money. How much that is depends on your license. So between 20 and 40% is what we would think it would be. So there was one infrastructure, I would say, green light on the dollars that we would save by moving to XM Cloud. The last one was site performance and security. For Cimic, they are one of the few organizations around the world that bought Sitecore not for its personalization capabilities. They bought it for its Sitecore performance. They bought it for its security. And we wanted to make sure that by moving to the newer version, in this case, XM Cloud, site performance and security were still top of mind. And that is what we ended up doing. So we had to show them that by moving to a headless environment, they're not skimming out on security. And if you move to a headless environment and you don't spend a single dollar, so we don't spend anything, performance marketing, zero, compared to a non-headless environment and headless environment, you should see your performance go up. So your Google Lighthouse score should go up on XM Cloud just because it's built on headless. Now, if I move to the next slide, you will see that this is just the metrics that we had, the success story of Cimic. It's available on sitecore.com. Cimic don't care about the results on the right. So, forget about all of these ones on the right. The ones that we want to focus on are the ones in the middle. So this project was built in such a way that they ended up saving 70% year on year on maintenance and governance. We had about a 30% reduction in infrastructure costs. And this is the kicker. Because of the guys that built it, we saved 40% of the project cost. So assume a project that costs $1 million. We ended up building it for $600,000. So you end up saving 40. So if the project was $2 million, we ended up saving, building it for 1.2 million, which is 40% saving. I cannot share with you the exact numbers, but imagine a 40% project saving cost. When have you ever been through been in a project where you saved project dollars. Very, very rare to find. Now, the thing that we also found was, remember I told you the content authoring environment in the previous page? In this one, we saw that we went and timed each and every communication manager they have. So they have about 9 companies or 10 companies, and they have, like, let's say 8 to 14 content authors. We went and measured each and every person's usage of Sitecore XP. How much time do they take today creating and publishing content? We found that the number was between 60 and 80 minutes. And using XM Cloud, that number fell to 20 minutes. So we saw a 400%, saving there, but we didn't know if 400% is too big. So we thought, you know what, let's go safe. Let's put it close to 250. That's why we went with 240. But in reality, it is between 300 and 500. It's about 400%. The thing that they also liked quite heavily was the fact that now it's twice as faster for them to actually build websites on their own. They very rarely need to come to us to build new websites. They do it on their own, and they win a lot of projects, so they can actually do that internally very, very well. There was a lot of lessons we learned on this project. So remember I told you, number one, we were the first to build this in Australia and New Zealand. Sitecore were learning quite a lot with this. Now the questions come, what do you use? Do you use Vercel? Do you use Netlify? Do you do it on your own? For us, the first thing we had to ask was, what language do we build it on? Sitecore's recommendation was Next.js. Why? Because XM Cloud is only available in Next.js at the time. So we ended up doing it on Next.js. However, we still have to decide whether we go with Netlify or Vercel. For Sitecore's recommendation, you can pick either, but our preference was Vercel. Now, the things you all have to keep in mind is, do you pick professional or enterprise? If you pick enterprise, it ticks a lot of your boxes. But if you pick professional, there's a few things you need to keep in mind. Number one, in Netlify, Sitecore redirects are not out of the box. So you would have to do a lot of custom code. You would have to do a custom environment thing, or you would have to make sure redirects are taken care of as a custom functionality, you would have to charge the client extra from a commercial perspective. But if you were to go down the route of Vercel, Sitecore redirects are out of the box. But if you are in professional, you can't do custom SSLs. Custom SSLs are something that is only available in the enterprise levels, because they use something called as Let's Encrypt for their custom SSLs in the professional tiers. So for clients that are actually not that bothered from a encryption perspective, especially for custom SSLs, they can go with anything. You can go with professional or enterprise. But for certain larger clients where security is paramount and their IT requirements mandate they use certain ways of working from a custom SSL's perspective, we had to choose enterprise. So something to keep in mind. Today, we're not really bothered whether it's Next.js, Angular, Vue, React. We're not really bothered about how we do it. We can do it on ASP.NET Core even. But from a front-end point of view, for this project, we had to think through whether it was professional or enterprise or Netlify or Vercel. The other thing to keep in mind was templates. Now, you all have been reusing Sitecore quite a bit. You all have been building components for a long time. But the reason you build components is that we want it to be reused. The question is, how much customization are you going to allow per component? How much customization is actually good? How many variants do you have to build per component? How many variants are actually okay? Now, as a rule of thumb, 0 to 6 variants per component is fine. Right? We have a session that we call the solution road mapping session, where we sit down with the client and we walk through every single design element that has been given to us, or rather we work, or rather we build, and we talk them through what is the component library that we would be building. So we tell them, hey, page number 1, component 3, let's call it the card component. It's very similar to your, about us page, another component there, the card component there. The dimensions are slightly different, but rather than building 2 components, can we just build 1 component with variants in it? That would save a lot of the dollars, and it would help us when we're actually building those components on multiple templates. So in this case, one of the requirements was theming. Now, theming mainly means, I'm not going to explain, I think you all know what theming means, but in this case, it was just applying different brand and color schemes to a template that is already pre-built with components. The thing is, each and every business unit, or rather operating company of CIMIC, have their own requirements around the website. So we all had to sit in a room and understand what it is that they want from the website, how much functionality can be customized. Do they actually need that much functionality? So one of the questions you as the team leads should have in you is to have the ability to question. Do you all know what this means? Why are we doing this? Do you all know that if we make this custom change, it means more time, more effort? If there is more time and more effort that will be entailed. But the ability to ask the question will save a lot of time of the project manager and thereby us when we talk to the client and ask for change requests. So that was one thing that we actually did very well on this in terms of lessons learned. Everybody were on the same page. When it comes to search, the search product of Sitecore was pretty shit. Forgive my language on that one. It was not ready. Let me put it that way. It was not ready at the time. Search was not ready at all. So we had to actually learn on the job, meaning Sitecore also had to learn on the job how to build or how to do things. There was a shift in mindset because in the XP world, the databases are hosted on XP itself, whereas in XM Cloud, there is no search databases. It has to be done through search itself. There was a mindset shift about how do we do the crawlers? How many crawlers do we get? What's the frequency of these crawlers? Instantaneous publishing was not something that was available. So we had to go out and either teach the client that, hey, you can't actually now do instantaneous publishing anymore. Or we have to go and tell Sitecore, you need to make a change on how Sitecore's, the search product has to work. We had to speak to the product team and we came out with something called as ingestion API, which is now how you build search. You have to use ingestion APIs. I think it was our colleague Dennis was the one who worked with the product team to actually come out with that concept of using an ingestion API. We then created another concept called force push API for absolute instantaneous publishing, because it would publish on the page, but on global search, it would not come up. It would take between 12 minutes and 2 hours to crawl the website from an indexer's point of view to display the results. We can't wait 1 hour for results to publish. That was not acceptable. So there had to be a fundamental shift in the way search was built. Thankfully, in January 2024, that got done. The last one was accelerators. In this case, we didn't have accelerators, so we had to build it completely custom for the client. The only thing we could actually migrate automatically was structured content. There was no front-end code we could migrate. There were through an accelerator. All of that would have to be built from scratch, apart from structured content that needs to be migrated. The one thing that I would add that was amazing on this particular project was that we had an absolutely amazing project manager. Now, you can be very good in the way you work and you build things, but if you don't have someone with you on the client side who understands your problems and understand why you're coming into this, you'll tend to just build in a silo, like we are all devs. We just put our heads down and we keep building. When we ask a question, someone needs to answer it. Or we need guidance in terms of what does this mean for us long term? Do we want it to be scalable? Do we want it to be future proof? Do we want to over customize it? Do we want to under customize it? Do we not want to think about customizations at all? We need a product owner or project managers from the customer side who will run with us, right? And in this case, we had someone amazing on that one. But I'll talk about the different types of accelerators in a bit, but I'll quickly jump into the next case study, which is the usage of an accelerator. In this case, the customer's name is Flatiron Dragados. They're a huge construction, heavy civil engineering company based in North America, so United States, the US. They're probably number 8 or 9 in the US in terms of size of how big they are from a heavy civil engineering perspective or construction perspective. The problem here was they had 3 different companies. So Flatiron, Dragados US, and Dragados Canada. And they 3 had to amalgamate, integrate, merge into one company called Flatiron Dragados. They actually were not happy at all with the way their websites were. When I say not happy, I mean absolutely not happy. I'll talk about the business case soon. But their ask was, Nathan, can we build this website in and make it multilingual? We need it to go live, on budget, on time. Now, a little bit of a story for you. CIMIC project went very well. They recommended us to Flatiron. And when we went over to Symposium last year, I flew to Denver, had a chat with the people there, and the ask was that we would build it from December to May. But different reasons, they had to shorten the timeline. All of us go through that, and this was not different. The new project timeline was January 6th to April 2nd. So we were given 85 days to build a website with no content available, everything created from scratch, um, only 2 members in the customer team, and all of that had to be done with full UX and UI. Why full UX and UI? Because it's an amalgamation of 3 companies. So we had to customize the accelerator to make sure that we cater to that requirement. But the important thing here is, again, let's talk through the business case. I put a point here called centralized ownership of content. Now, what does that mean? Remember, I told you there were 3 companies. Each company had their own ways of working. So some of them work with agencies in the US, some of them work with agencies in Canada, some of them work with agencies in Spain. The reason for the website project was to bring all of that into the US. So they didn't want to work with multiple content teams available abroad or in multiple parts of the world. They wanted everything done from one geography. And that was part of the business case. The second one was they wanted, and I quote, they wanted a WordPress style WYSIWYG editing interface. Now, Pages gives us that. So that was an easy one. But they wanted the content authoring site to be very, very top notch. The third one is, again, I'm quoting, a scalable, future-proofed, and faster way to build new websites. They wanted the ability to do things on their own. They didn't want to always depend on an agency. They did not always want to depend on a third party to come in and build websites. They wanted us to give them a template, and in the future, they, create their own websites on their own and only come to us when they absolutely need it for projects. And the last one, they wanted to reduce their time and budget around maintenance. Currently, their websites were built in such a way that they're spending too much time and money trying to enhance or fix. So in the new one, they wanted that to be much, much, much better and faster and cheaper, if I can use that word. Now, this is the results on FD Corp, so Flatiron Regados. The key thing to note here is, again, look at the one on the top right. It says 20% project cost saved. That's a phenomenal achievement when you save budget. Like if you've penciled in X amount of money and you come under budget, that is incredible. For us, the other thing to note was 55 days ahead of schedule. So when we put the business case together, we said, we'll go live on this date in May, and the date was brought forward. So we went and told them, hey, we can do it, but we can only do 30% of scope. Are you okay? We'll define MVP. MVP will be 30% of that scope. They said, yeah, no problem, easy. And then we started building it. And as we built it, we found that, we can do a lot more than 30%. So we ended up delivering 70% of scope. That is 40% over what we did, put as MVP as part of that initial go live date. The things that they were very happy with is that they had 800% increase in their ability to create content and everything else, pages, 700% increase in content speed and whatever else. So I'm not really going to go into that one. Those are the fun stuff, but the important ones are the commercial numbers, 20%, 55 days ahead of schedule, 70% over 30% delivered. And the last one was unlimited warranty. When Codehouse builds a website, we usually build it very well, and we put our money where our mouths are. So you can't do that by not giving warranty. Usually it's 30 days, 45 days, 60 days, whatever it is. In our world, in the Codehouse world, it's unlimited warranty because we just want to build it properly. Again, we go to the last one. So I'm just going to open it all up. In this case, the lessons learned were tremendous, like quite a lot of lessons learned. The first one was the timeline was pretty aggressive. Now, generally, when you use an accelerator, you're boxing in the client's requirements around the accelerator because you don't want to go beyond what the accelerator was meant to be. In this case, we are amalgamating 3 websites. each of them with a UX and UI that has to be one UX and UI. We also have to make sure that they can do the content loading and whatever else on their own side. So we had to box them in. Even though we took 2 months to do the UX and UI, we had to box them in and say, look, we can't change too many things from the accelerator because otherwise it'll become a 4 month or 5 month or 6 month project. So let us curtail what we can change. Unfortunately, a lot of things had to change. So there was a lot of people working on the project. I think what, 6 or 7 people, so not too many, but that was one thing. We found that the timeline was too aggressive. Do we want to do that kind of timeline again, 85 days? Not really. I think the next time we would go into something like this, we would say 4 months. I think 4 months would be a decent time for a website like this with full UX and UI. The time zone was actually pretty good for us. So the client is based in Denver, Colorado. We are based in Sydney, Australia. It ended up becoming in such a way that the client would go to sleep by telling us, this is what we want. And they would wake up in the morning and the showcase is ready for them to see. So they were actually pretty happy with that. I think for you, it would be something similar because you all work with clients all around the world. And you all are based in India predominantly. So you all should be pretty used to that particular concept. We were not, because all of our clients are based in Australia and we work from Australia. This particularly was something that we learned as a nice thing, the time zone thing. Um, the environment was a challenge. Now, you guys know that when you want to build something, the environments need to be commissioned by Sitecore at the start of the project. Now, in this case, if the project started on Jan 6th, it means traditionally you would want the environments of Search or XM Cloud commissioned and given access for you guys, probably in somewhere in January, like for you to do sprint 0 or the first sprint that you're doing all of the setup in. In our case, the environments for Search was not commissioned until 2 weeks before go live. So project started in January 6th. We're supposed to go live April 2nd. We get it somewhere around March 15, 16, 17. So we had to go out and set it up, configure it, build, deploy in 2 weeks with all of the structured content and everything that is available on from their side, and a lot of unstructured content that needs to be put in as well because they just don't exist. That was pretty challenging, but it had no impact on our timeline. We ended up doing it all properly. A big challenge was something that I put here as content pivot. You guys would have known that a very powerful man got elected in the elections in America in January, and that meant Canada and US are no longer best friends. We talk about it globally as to, oh, look at how US and Canada have had a falling out, but we had a direct, we were impacted properly on this one. 1 week before go live, there had to be a change in the content strategy. So we had to delete, rework content for Canada on the US websites and for US on the Canadian website. We had to make proper career portal changes. So we had to create 2 career portals now because we didn't want US people to come to the Canadian one, or rather the combined one. So we had to create one for just US and one just for Canada. All of that had to happen 1 week before go live without impacting the go live date. And this would not have been possible again without a project owner a product owner or project manager from the client side who was able to run with us. Like there's an expression we use in the agency world. We can run, but we want the client to run with us. Usually you don't get clients who will run with you. In our case, we have been lucky that we've had good clients who have been happy to run with us. So they were happy to do all of the content migration with us. We helped them on the automated and the manual side. From a content development standpoint, they were doing it late nights with us. UI testing all on point. There was no delays at all from their side. So again, phenomenal achievement from their side. But these were the 2 case studies. The thing we learned from this was that an accelerator shouldn't be a shortcut. If you think of an accelerator as a shortcut, you've already lost it a little bit. You need to think of it as a starting point to build with purpose. So always think of it as a foundation for where you can build some more. If a client thinks of it as a shortcut to get a project done quickly, it can lead to something that could be very troublesome in a year's time. But moving on to the next topic in our presentation, it is why do we go down the accelerator approach? I'll talk about a little bit of a historical thing, and then I'll come back to the next slide. So I don't know how many of us have been in the Sitecore ecosystem for a very long time, but this is my 8th year. When I joined Sitecore, SXA was launched on version 9. So I'm not going back to version 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I only came into the ecosystem from version 9 onwards. And before that, if you have to go down, let's say 2003 onwards or 2004 onwards, .NET as a programming language came about only because it gave the power to you as the developers. So you can build on .NET the way you want to build it. A lot of the flexibility is on you guys to build it the way you want. What does that mean? It means just like our fingerprints, every developer is different. None of y'all are the same. We know that someone is actually a good problem solver. We know someone is actually very by the book. We know someone is actually very good with thinking out of the box. So each developer has their own style of writing code. What does that mean for customers and agencies when we build projects? It means no code is the same. It means every project is a little bit different in the .NET world. That is why in 2016 or something, I think it was 2016, 17 maybe, Sitecore came out with the terminology Helix because they wanted to standardize the way developers write Sitecore code. Now, why did they want to standardize? Because they had a lot of the Sitecore customers complain that we estimated the project would be $1 million. Now it has gone to $2 million. Why is that? Because some people are very fast in building things and they estimate it like that, but then it is not them who build it. There are other people who build it. They are much slower in the way they go about writing code. But the customer doesn't get that. Also, some people can be very good at it. Some people can be very bad at it. But from a commercial standpoint, it impacts Sitecore. So they came out with something called as Helix. As part of that, they also came out with 120 code snippets. At the time, it started off with, I don't know, maybe 30, 40, then it went to 70, and it ended up at 120 code snippets on SXA, Sitecore Experience Accelerator. What did that 120 code snippets mean? It was Sitecore's first initial attempt after version 9 for an accelerator, telling agencies or partners, why don't you use these code snippets and turn them into components so that you can populate your component library? We actually use that quite heavily when we build SXA websites. And then we thought, let's go out with accelerators to the market. And Sitecore launched XM Cloud, so all of those accelerators became extinct. With that, I thought it's important to then give you a feel of what are the different kinds of accelerators that are available in the market today. So these are the different types of accelerators. I'm not going to go and read out every single one, but I've tried to think about everything that would happen. So author experience kits at the bottom, those are the uniform. If you've heard of uniform, it started off as an author experience kit. We have all heard of Figma to code, UI component, migration accelerators, integration blueprints. So without taking too much time on each one, I'll just very quickly talk you through the pros and cons, even though I won't be reading from the slide. So the first one is called design to code. The most common one for us to remember is Kaju. So Kaju started off as a Figma to code accelerator. It sort of like is a combination of a migration accelerator and a design to code because it can even migrate the backend properly, or rather in some form. But with design to code accelerators, the one thing that you have to keep in mind is that it is very, very good for big corporates. If you have a lot of brands, if you want to roll out a lot of brands where you want it to be consistent, Figma to code is very good. The more sites you have, the better off it is. Why? Because it's cheaper. If you only have 1 or 2 sites, not really very good to use Figma to code. But if you have 1,000 websites, 500, 100, I should say the other way around, 100, 500, 1,000 websites, that's when Figma to code actually is a lot better to use. But the one thing that you have to remember is if you are building a highly unique, flagship, a flagship, a corporate site, a proper one with custom UX flows and evolving design systems. So the design system is not static. You want to add to it as you're building more and more sites. This approach can become a bit restrictive because Figma to code will spit out your components as universal React components. And then you still have to build the functionality for it, right? So it won't give you mobile and desktop separately. Maybe today it does, but when we were building on Figma to code, it was not spitting it out as mobile separate and desktop separate. It would all give it off as universal React. We still had to build the functionality for each component. That would save some, but not a lot of money. So that's why scale became a big thing. So the more components you have, the better off it is. The second accelerator I want to talk about is the UI component library. Uh, UI component library is actually, according to me, one of the more common accelerators that can be seen today. This accelerator is actually more on whether you use an enterprise library or an open source library that is available online. So you buy it, or you build one yourself. Just like SXA, you build one yourself and you grow it as you're building more and more projects. Now, the good thing about this is that it would cut down front-end build effort because the UI component is already pre-built in a way. So you mainly have to only tweak the front end and focus on the back end. It's pre-built components. So it should be a lot quicker to deploy. It should be cost effective, especially if you're not a huge dynamic site with 1,000 websites or something. But if you have very few websites and it's not overtly complex, one of the best ones to use. But when your sites demand bespoke interactions, think about it as complex user journeys, or an example to use would be airline booking engines. We can't use UI component libraries. We may have to go down the path of something else because we'll have to customize this quite heavily. Because the more tweaks you do, what's the point of going with this anyway? Because the point of this is to reuse components with a little bit of tweaking, not build them from scratch. But our accelerator is more on the UI component library approach. Version 1 of our accelerator was designed to code. Version 2 and 3 are mainly around the UI component library. We then go into something called as migration accelerators. I think you'll know this quite a lot. I'm not going to spend time talking too much on this one, but an example of this would be content migration. So think of it as automating, bulk migration of structured, unstructured content, where you want to preserve the metadata, where you want to, how do I put it? It's very, very good for large content libraries from a content migration accelerator perspective. But now you get migration accelerators that are even sending forth all of the XDB data into CDP and whatnot. So think all of those come under the same migration accelerator thing. One of the negatives of this is if your IA, your information architecture has changed. So from the old one to the new one, if the IA has changed, your schema matching, that will break. Now, it would also not migrate any of the business logic or custom workflows. So think of it as if you want to lift and shift without improving UX, okay. But if you want to improve UX a little bit, you can't use this. It's better to use one of the other two. The moment we go to DevOps and CI/CD, I think you all are pretty familiar with this. So think of this as automating anything to do with the build, test, and deploy from a consistency perspective. We want to take into account governance. We want to take into account security. Rollback strategies have to be worked in. So most of the DevOps accelerators that we have, or rather tools that we have, take all of this into account. But if you don't have DevOps engineers at all, or you don't have a managed service partner, sometimes it can be a little bit tricky to use this one. In some cases that I've seen, the setup is a little bit too complex. Depending on who the partner is, depending on the type of one that you use, it can be a little bit tricky. There is also ongoing maintenance. So it has to be budgeted separately. The next one is integration blueprints. Very easy to understand, isn't it? Like everybody has an integration blueprint. Our Sitecore, what's it called? The Sitecore connector, which can connect to anything. Sitecore Connect, that's what it's called. That's an integration blueprint. You'll have seen about the connectors between Salesforce and Sitecore, Microsoft Dynamics and Sitecore, SAP and Sitecore. Those are all integration blueprints. We also have integration blueprints now between DAM, so Content Hub, and XM Cloud. I think some of the larger agencies are coming out with something like that, or have already come out with that. Those are integration blueprints. The whole point of this is to fast track any integrations for known systems. The point of this is to reduce risk. So we don't want risk from the customer side, we don't want risk from our side, and we want to avoid reinventing the wheel. So we don't want to start from scratch. But if your tech stack isn't standard and the APIs, keep changing, we can't use them. We still have to build something custom there. Also, subscriptions could be involved. So not could be, they are involved. So when we go with integration blueprints, 99.9% of the time, you will have to pay extra to use those services, to use that blueprint every year. So you pay a subscription license all the time. But otherwise, it should be pretty okay. I would say a must-have if we are going down, integrating to CRMs and everything. The next one is one of my favorites, multi-site localization frameworks. You all have heard of this. Everybody works on multi-site solutions. So you build a template and you can reuse that template. That's the whole point of this. The big advantage from my side when I talk about this is, we want to handle complexity at scale. We want to support governance. We want to actually make sure approval flows allows for content, component reuse. We want to make sure that it aligns well with the customer's XM Cloud roles or the customer's workflow, permissions, all of those sides. So a super user will give a template to a local country to say, what, you can create as many sites as you want. They don't need to go and do anything more than just create site and populate content. It's a lot simpler once it's built well. An example of it from a long time back is we built the Wagamama solution. For the ones that don't know Wagamama is a huge restaurant chain based in Europe and rest of the world, Japan, Australia, Asia. We built their websites in the UK and then gave them the ability to click a button and a new website would launch for the restaurant. It was tremendously well used because it was built on a localization framework on languages. However, it is overkill for a single site project. You don't use this if you only have 1, 2, or 3 websites. You use this if you have a lot of websites. The second negative about this particular framework is that it would require absolutely strong planning. Now, what does this mean? Planning of models and hierarchies. So we need to make sure we go down to that level to find out who gets to use it, how they get to use it. The QA has to be actually done very, very well. And usually for a project, let's say we go with 10, 20, 30% QA. When we go with multi-site localization frameworks, QA has to be double because we don't want things to break. Always there'll be certain things going on. We don't want to go out of budget. So QA has to be a little bit, priced extra because we want to take into account multiple multiple geographies, multiple variants across the geography. So one thing to keep in mind over there. And the last one is something called as author experience kits. Again, I'm not going to read the screen, but for you guys, the one thing to remember as an example is uniform. So once upon a time, Sitecore XP, actually not once upon a time, even today, the authoring experience in XP is not the best. So there were certain brands that came about, an example being Uniform, that came about trying to improve the UI of Content Editor and Experience Editor. Say, hey, you can keep Sitecore. Our product will sit on top of Sitecore, and you can use our product from a content authoring point of view. The whole point of this is to improve the content editor, the marketer's usage of Sitecore. And it works. However, for XM Cloud, it's pretty useless because the content authoring experience in XM Cloud is pretty damn good. So we don't need an author experience kit for XM Cloud. But for the other products, it ended up becoming very, very good. Why? Because we want to improve the day-to-day authoring. We want to reduce the amount of training we need to do for our customers. We want to enforce governance. We want to enforce consistency across all of the people using the website. We also want to make sure that, velocity is taken into account when we want to create and publish content. Epically good this particular kit for localization and everything, because people don't understand English in multiple geographies. So from a training point of view, if you just give them a framework that is very easy to understand, they'll get to do it very well. But when you go with a kit like this, you're, how do I put it? You're boxed into that kit. So you can become a bit too rigid, I would say. It restricts a little bit of flexibility because the tool is given to you. You can't do any form of critical thinking to say, hey, what if I improve this? What if I improve that? You can't. It's not your kit. In Experience Editor, I can customize Experience Editor today to put in certain things. Why? Because I can. But with these author experience kits, you can't. It's someone else's kit. You just use it. That's the type of different accelerators that are available on Sitecore. I'll go to the final couple of slides. Where is it? Yeah. So the last but one slide is, when do you not use an accelerator? It's a very, very important question. So we've seen a case study on a custom build. We've seen a case study on an accelerator. Can we actually use an accelerator every time? The answer from us is yes. So even if you have a very bespoke UX, you still can have the setup as the accelerator, as the base set, and then add to it. Of course, if the integration depth is way beyond what you have thought it to be, that will become a custom thing anyway. But we still can use the accelerator as the base, right? So rather than thinking, oh, I will save 60% of my time and budget, think of it as saving 10, 20, 30% of the time. That is still okay, right? And with that, we go to the final slide, which is an accelerator can end up becoming the foundation of any website project, according to me. Like, I genuinely think it can be used for any project at any time under any circumstances. In some cases, we can use them as a combination of 2 different accelerators. Sometimes we can use it as a combination of 3 different accelerators, but it would be where Sitecore is going. It would be completely foolhardy, according to me, that we not use accelerators moving forward, because we'll be going up against people that do. So if you've not used an accelerator so far, if you've not used any of the different types we've spoken about, try using them. It's actually extremely beneficial for you in the long run. AI is coming. I've purposely not spoken and used those 2 letters AI in the first 45 minutes, but we all have to skill up a little bit, and using accelerators, using AI in our accelerator in some form is only going to be beneficial. With that, I think we've come to the end of the presentation. So let me stop sharing screen so that, if you have time, you can ask me any questions. Otherwise, you can always just reach out to me on LinkedIn with any questions.
Any questions, guys? I think that was a really great presentation on a broader aspect or perspective of how a Sitecore project should be built, and the client should keep up with the client architecture and other technologies as well. So, any questions you can ask now.
Yeah, this was not a
Okay.
technical. Yeah, this was not a technical session at all. It was mainly on the strategic and commercial side of how Sitecore projects should be done and what do you keep in mind doing them. It's more of a giving you a point of view from the strategic mindset about how we go about making the client happy. Most of the time, we are down on the trenches,
Yes.
making things happen, but we have to always keep the clients happy, and what it is that we learn when we keep them happy. That's the point of this.
Yeah, that was really insightful presentation as well, because we all, as a developer or a technical people, if we look into only how it is developed, the
Yeah.
performance and other things. But it's really great to understand the overall perspective and run along with the business. So thank you, Nathan. Thank you so much for such a great presentation. Thank you, team.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.